You've seen the title, you know what's happening. Today, I'm coloring the books in my collection that I've been avoiding. I've picked 3 books off my shelves that fall within that avoidance category. Each of them I've been avoiding for a range of different reasons. I'll talk about those reasons in just a second. But just so we're all on the same wavelength, I'm not planning to finish a full page from each book in this video. My goal is to simply spend an hour with each one, maybe longer if I really get into the creative flow, and hopefully committing that coloring time to each book will show me that there's no reason to keep avoiding them. And who knows, maybe after watching this video, you'll feel inspired to add a little bit of color to the books you've been avoiding too. So the first book is one that you've seen it numerous times on the channel. I'm honestly embarrassed that I've shown it so many times and still not colored in it. It's Mania by Christopher Hart. I seriously love the illustrations in this book so much. Like, the manga style is absolutely incredible. But yeah, I've never colored a manga illustration before, so I am feeling a little bit apprehensive about it. And yeah, I wasn't intimidated to color in this book when I initially first received it, but the longer it's just sat on my shelf uncolored, the more I've built it up in my head. So we are gonna color a little bit of something in this book today. The next book is one that hasn't been on my shelf for a very long time, but I have been avoiding the coloring book series for a long time, and that is the mythographic series. I have the Wild Summer book here. A lovely subscriber gifted this to me off my Amazon wishlist, and so obviously I need to color in this ASAP. The reason I find the mythographic series so intimidating is just because of how tiny the illustrative details are, especially in the Joseph Catimbang mythographic books. The artwork is stunning, but yeah, there's just a lot of detail going on. I have a feeling it's gonna be similar to when I colored a Kirby Roseanne's illustration for the first time, where you see so many tiny details and you're not sure how to shade it, but then once you actually get coloring, it's so much easier than you anticipate. And then the third and final book I picked out that I've been avoiding is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. We have My Simple Pleasure by the Ohuhu brand. I have thought about donating this coloring book because I've spoken about it a gazillion times. I've never been drawn to the kind of like simple and cozy coloring books. The amount of coloring space you have to work with really does kind of stump me in a way. And to be honest, I've been avoiding coloring any more pages within all of the Ohuhu coloring books just because the paper is so different to what I'm used to. But good things never came from comfort zones, so we are also going to be coloring something in this book today as well. Now, to help me decide which page I'm going to be coloring in each of these books, I decided to bring out a trusty old friend that hasn't made an appearance on the channel in a while. It is my coloring prompt jar. I have not used this jar since the very beginning of the year when I did my 25 pages to color in 2025 challenge, and it felt time to bring it out again, dust it off, and get it to help me choose which page I'm going to color in each of these books. I also have all these prompts available for you to download and print off yourself on my Ko-fi store if you're interested. The link is always in the description. So let's start off with Manga Mania. I've been putting it off for way too long. Get really deep in there. God, 20 are going to come out at once. Oh, I love this one. A page with a love heart. I have a feeling that because this book is within the manga illustration style, there's going to be a lot of love hearts on a lot of different pages. So give me a second to flip through and find a love heart page. Surprisingly, there were actually a lot less love hearts in this book than I thought. Like, there were still a lot of pages to choose from, but I don't know, I thought every second page would have a love heart on it. I've decided to go with this page here. This illustration is on the more simpler side for this book. And the love heart aspect of this page is actually in the background here. You can kind of see these love heart rainbow shapes. They're more evident on the opposite page with the male character here, but on first glance, I think I want to go straight in and color the hair and skin of this character. It is one of the most intimidating parts for me, but I feel like I can have a lot of fun with hair color, especially in a manga setting. Hello from future Kira. I'm going to be popping in during the coloring portions of this video to share my thought process as I was working in each of these avoided coloring books. But yes, I'm still wearing the same shirt because I love continuity. And so the very first thing I dove into when working in Manga Mania here was seeing how the paper held up with water-soluble mediums. And I'm very sad to report that this paper and water, yeah, they're not a match made in heaven. Maybe it's a me thing, maybe I use too much water, but regardless, it did not turn out well. The texture of the paper really got compromised once I activated the Neo Color 2s and Derwent Inktense. And yeah, in turn that made my colored pencil shading extremely difficult later on. I did still manage to color the hair and skin semi-successfully, but yeah, I definitely won't be using any water in the future in the Manga Mania coloring book. Now for a majority of the shading, I used a mix of the Ohuhu Halavar pencils as well as the Faber-Castell Polychromos. The Ohuhu pencils were the ones I struggled with most since it was really hard to get an even laydown after the water compromised paper issue. The Polychromos, however, didn't do too badly. I probably would have just used the polys exclusively if they had all the colors I needed to bring this character's hair to life, but alas, that was not the case, and so I needed a few of the Ohuhu pencils to supplement. But anyway, moving on from pencil brands and mediums, I wanted to color this character's hair in a really fun and funky way that was true to the anime art style. And so as I usually do when I need a little bit of inspiration, I hopped onto Pinterest and found this image here. As you can probably tell, I ended up pulling inspiration from the first character's hair in the top right corner. Oh, I just loved that pink to beigey peach gradient. It was really unique, and the hairstyle itself was also very similar to the character I was coloring on the page. I'll admit, I was a little nervous about whether I could shade the hair effectively. Christopher Hart's illustrations don't give a lot of guidance when it comes to shadow placement, and so I was mostly figuring it out as I went. But honestly, aside from not being able to get the smoothest blend on the page, I was really happy with how the shading turned out. The longer I worked on it, the clearer the shadow placement became, and I have really learned that the key to coloring hair, especially with oil-based pencils, is lots and lots of layers. I started out very lightly and kept gradually building up the color and depth from there. Always remember, it's easier to add more pigment than it is to take it away. Oh, I'm just so glad I can finally tick this book off my avoidance radar. It's been on it for way too long, and I can now see how valuable this book is going to be for improving my coloring skills. My thought process is if I can get really comfortable coloring hair in this book, where there isn't much shading indication to guide me, then the coloring of hair in pretty much any other book is going to be an absolute breeze. Now, when it came to coloring the skin, I kept things extremely simple. Partly because of the anime art style, realistic skin shading didn't feel necessary here and it let the hair be the star of the page, but also because of, yes, the stupid page compromisation issue. I really tried to make the Ohuhus and polys work, but in the end I had to call in the big guns, my Prismacolors. Prismacolors are pretty much my saving grace for creating smooth blends on pretty much any paper type, but in this case, this one Prismacolor absolutely saved the day. It helped me achieve a much more seamless blend, and even though it did flatten the illustration a little, I'd still rather lose a bit of depth than end up with a patchy, messy blend. But yes, all those issues aside, like I said, I really am glad that I made a start in this book. This coloring session taught me what mediums I will not be using in Manga Mania again in the future, and I pleasantly surprised myself with how this hair gradient turned out. Not too shabby, Kira, not too shabby. Alright, it's time to move on to Wild Summer by Joseph Catimbang. Let's see what our page prompt is going to be. I swear, if I get the prompt, a page set in summer, I'm gonna rage quit. I don't think this is gonna be doable for this book. It's a symmetrical page. I'll have a quick flip through right now, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing symmetrical. Oh, okay, wait. That is kind of symmetrical. Hold on, let me keep flipping. I guess the otter page is kind of symmetrical as well. I mean, it's not the correct definition of symmetrical. Look, I was thinking I could do this lion page here because it kind of has a symmetrical energy to it. It's not fully symmetrical, but there's some aspect of symmetry to it. Oh, I don't know if I should pick another prompt or if I should just do the lion page. You know what? Let's just go with what the prompt jar wants. We're gonna do the lion illustration. Yeah, I'm very scared by this prospect. So I went straight into basing the water and lion on this page, and instead of sticking with a standard blue color palette, I decided to mix things up a bit and do a blue, purple, and pink color scheme instead. To base everything, I used a mix of Artex and Ohuhu alcohol markers with a total of 4 different colors. What surprised me though was how long it took for me to just lay down these base colors. It ended up taking me nearly an hour, so you can bet that I went over my 1 hour time commitment for this coloring session. In fact, I actually went over time for every single page I colored in this video. Once I get into the flow of coloring, I really do struggle to stop. For both Mania and Wild Summer, I spent nearly 2 hours coloring, and then for the next book you'll be seeing shortly, I spent around 1.5 hours coloring. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that in case you're curious. I know a lot of you find it reassuring when I tell you how long it takes me to complete a page or even just color a small section of a page. Don't worry, coloring is definitely not a quick process, or at least for me, it's not. Anyway, moving on to some actual shading work, I decided to experiment and play around a bit with some analogous shadow colors. If you caught my last video, you'll know that after really enjoying complementary shadow shades and my color combos, my next endeavor was to see how analogous shadow colors would compare. So I figured this was the perfect page to start dipping my toes into that technique, since the whole color palette pretty much is analogous. And oh my goodness, these analogous shadows completely messed with my brain. What I did was use a dark pink shade wherever I based with blue, a dark purple over the pink basing, and then dark blue over the purple basing. And let me tell you, I had to concentrate so hard to remember which color went where on the page. My instincts were just telling me, Kira, put the pink shading on the pink elements, or blue on the blue, etc. I definitely slipped up in a few spots, but yeah, good thing about working with this analogous palette is that those mishaps were pretty much unnoticeable. As for the technique itself, I don't think I mind it. This was obviously just my first attempt. I want to do a lot more research into the technique and practice a few color combinations as well, but I can definitely see the appeal. It creates quite a harmonious effect on the page and is a much different vibe compared to the bold, dramatic effect you get when using complementary shadow shades. For the shading here, I ended up testing out my Artex pencils, and honestly, I wasn't super in love with how they performed on this paper. They felt a bit scratchy for some reason, and whilst it wasn't a horrible experience, it wasn't super enjoyable either. So I probably won't be reaching again for them when working in this book. And yeah, wow, even though I only managed to shade the lion's mane in this coloring session, I can already tell this page is going to take me quite a while to finish. My biggest concern at the moment is making sure the main elements of the illustration don't get lost in the literal sea of pinks, purples and blues. I think I'm gonna have to heavily rely on a white acrylic marker to make certain elements pop, and also use contrasting colors for the lanterns and surfers in the bottom half of the illustration. So while I wouldn't say that I've completely erased my apprehension towards the mythographic series, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully by the time I eventually complete this page, even if it's only semi-successful, I'll feel much less intimidated tackling the rest of the book, and who knows, maybe even another book in the mythographic series. Alright, it's time for our last avoided coloring book. It is My Simple Pleasure by Ohuhu. Okay, prompt jar, give me something I can actually work with and not that I have to loophole my way through. I really need longer fingers for this. Okay, let's see. A page based on a holiday. I know the exact page from this book that I'm gonna color. It is this very Christmas inspired illustration here. We've got some Christmas trees in the background. We've got these cute little snowmen. I'm actually excited for this one. I feel like I can add a lot of my own details and have a lot of fun with textures as well. So thank you, prompt jar. You were actually on my side today. Now, for some reason, out of all the pages I colored in this video, this one was the scariest to start. That always seems to be the case when I'm diving into a page that I'll be predominantly coloring with alcohol markers. They just intimidate me a little because they're not as forgiving or controllable as colored pencils. There's a lot more room for error. But with that being said, every time I color with them, I thoroughly enjoy my experience and love how the finished page looks. So clearly, I just need to get over that weird mental block of mine. I'm even starting to think maybe it'll be a good idea to always have one alcohol marker page on the go alongside a colored pencil one, just to keep me in practice. But anyway, mini tangent over. For this particular coloring session, I decided to focus on coloring the Christmas trees as well as one of the snowmen. And I actually got a lot of inspiration for how to tackle these snow-capped trees from a super helpful tutorial on Instagram. The account is called @bellybeancoloring. I'll try to remember to link it down below because that's definitely what helped me get started here. It did take me a few tries to figure out the best way to create a smooth gradient for the green segments of the trees. I had to experiment a lot with layering and stroke direction because you'll notice that with each section of the tree, the blends start to look better and better. As I said earlier, the thing about this paper is that it's quite different from other coloring books because it's bleed proof. There's a special coating on it that prevents the alcohol markers from bleeding on the page itself or bleeding through to the other side, which is totally an amazing feature. But the trade-off is that the ink doesn't really absorb into the paper, so the ink kind of just, it sits on the surface and takes much longer to dry. Because of that, layering becomes much trickier, and layering is usually my go-to approach when working with alcohol markers. Normally, I like to build up a lot of layers, but on this page I found that 3 to 4 layers was the maximum I could manage before the ink started pooling a bit on the surface, or I was forced to wait for the ink to dry between layers. And you'll get to see what happens when you don't leave enough drying time between layers when I color the snowman momentarily. I'm really glad though that I finally mustered up the courage to color on this paper again because it was so much easier this time around. Once I quickly remembered the best approach for handling this paper, I found myself really enjoying the process. And that's why I continue to make videos like this one. They take away the scariness of certain coloring techniques, books, or mediums. Once you actually get started, you realize it's nowhere near as difficult or as intimidating as you might have built it up in your head. So if you take anything away from this video, let it be this. Just jump in and try the thing you've been avoiding simply because you're afraid of failing. I'm not always perfect at following that advice myself, but when I do commit to pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and stop playing it safe, that's when I notice my coloring skills improve exponentially. Now you might have noticed that when I was coloring the snow on the trees earlier, I used a bit of a blue and purple combo, and I really liked that unrealistic approach. So I decided to bring it over here to the snowman as well, this time adding a little bit of pink into the mix too, and I also approached the snowman shading a bit differently. For the darkest shadow areas, I used brush strokes, and then I switched to a dotted stippling technique to blend the markers more seamlessly into the uncolored white of the paper. Now we've made our way to the issue that I mentioned earlier, where I didn't allow enough drying time between layers and had a little bit of a smearing faux pas. I had decided I wanted to give the snowman a very basic red striped scarf, but I also wanted to add some shading on top of that pattern so it didn't look flat. So I laid down the red stripes, waited a short while, and then went over them with this light warm grey tone to create the shading. And as you can probably guess, the red wasn't completely dry yet, which caused a little bit of smearing between, the red and grey ink. So when I moved onto the snowman's hat, I made sure I gave the red ink plenty of time to dry. While waiting, I colored the snowman's buttons and continued to add a little bit more depth to the scarf. And yeah, that ended up being enough time for the red to dry, and round 2, there was no smearing at all. Issue resolved. Now, I didn't actually plan to do any acrylic marker coloring in this session. I was gonna do all that acrylic marker work once I did all the alcohol marker coloring later down the track. But of course, I couldn't help myself. I added a bunch of white dots to the snowman's body, lightly shaded the band of his hat, and added even more dots there. I also gave the scarf some red and white tassels, which I thought looked really cute. And also because I was clearly on an acrylic marker roll, I also added lots of white dots to the Christmas trees. Seriously, once I get started with my acrylic markers, I just can't stop. But I don't think I went too overboard this time, and I feel like these little details really took the few elements I'd colored in this session and just, took them up a little notch. While I don't think I'll ever be a frequent colorist in the simple and bold coloring genre, working on this page here definitely got me seeing the appeal, so who knows, maybe you'll see a few completed cozy coloring pages from me more in the future. I'm gonna throw it back to past Kira now, but I can confidently say that My Simple Pleasure is no longer on my list of avoided coloring books. Well, there you have it, everyone. That was me coloring the 3 books that I've been avoiding the most in my collection. If you made it to this part of the video, I would love to know what coloring books you've been avoiding, if you've been avoiding these ones as well, or if you have other ones on your shelves that you've been a little bit scared to dive into. Let me know in the comments below, we can chat all about it. But until next time, happy coloring, friends. Have a good day, have a good life, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!